So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is going to be a pitch battle on actually not the most up-to-date version of the test build. This is, again, I'm trying to navigate a little bit of a minefield by making sure that I don't leave any replays that people want me to show behind as they start rattling through all of the various versions that they currently are. So I'm going to do this one now, and it's a pitch battle, and I'm coming into this with a little bit of trepidation because it's a very long battle for what is effectively a 2v2 on a very open map, so I'm kind of morbidly curious to see why that might be the case, but there is a little bit of a theme going on here as well. Obviously this is more of a showcase of what's going on mechanically with some of the factions in the game at the moment rather than any sort of story-based narrative, but the Elder races are going to be the red team and the Forces of Men are going to be the blue team, both from the west and from the east. So, without further ado, we shall go through the compositions. We'll go through fairly quickly as well, considering the overall length of this particular battle. Looks Rin, obviously the solid front line that Rhun have, and when it comes to facing off against forces like elves and dwarves, you do need that little bit of extra rigidity as the Easterlings to really be able to go toe-to-toe with them. You will have the edge in terms of numbers, but that alone won't be enough generally if you want to go into melee with them, and the Scion Rim offer you the best bulwark that you have. The Gnar Rim, of course, at long range you're going to suffer against the damage that the elves in particular can dish out against you. Ered, Luin are good in a skirmish fight as well, but Rhun do have options when it comes to their long range, but it does need to be augmented with other things. Very much a combined units kind of faction. You can't rely on individual things. It's the sum of the parts that make Rhun what they are. More Scion Rim on the flank. Of course, the damage of rangers is well documented in this version of the game, and Carmel's Shadow Bow should be pretty good as long as they can avoid getting skirmished down by the elves with their range and damage. Flag Rim, of course, when you know that the dwarves are going to be on the other side of the field, you know that as Rhun you do have one very decent weapon against them, and that is a prevalence of armor piercing throughout your roster, and the Flag Rim, the most obvious example of that. The Carmel's Immortals are reasonably cheap, reasonably decent melee combatant. The lack of a shield could be a problem if they get hit by too many ranged units, but in this kind of battle, though considering the length, actually maybe skirmishing will be a big factor. The Gamperim, of course, as well. I mean, pole arms, the elves don't have, outside of Linden, they don't have as many examples of this kind of unit that they can blanket the line with, and of course against the dwarves that armor piercing is always going to be useful. The Carmel's Chosen looking resplendent in their new gear. Very dependable unit of bodyguard infantry. The crossbows, of course, are a weapon that neither of the opposition are going to have today, so if they can get those into position and do some good damage with them, then they could be on to a winner. And then the Dragon Knights, as well as some of these more heavier units of cavalry. The Golden Raiders, we've seen quite a lot of the mounted crossbows. It's actually been a long time since we last saw the standard Lug Inas Rim. They were a very big part of original Third Age way back when, because they were the heaviest unit of cavalry that Rhun had available to them. Of course, times have changed since then, but standard lancers have been pretty effective as of late, so it's understandable why they've been brought. Their allies today, Cardolan, the men from the west, they're a little bit more by the book when it comes to their melee force. They depend a little bit more on pikes rather than halberds, and of course they don't have the armor piercing in melee that Rhun have anyway, but they do have a little bit more defensive savvy as a result of that. Good armor, and of course the extra range of those pikes, and right in the middle the Wardens of Tir and Gorthad as well are really elite units of pikes which can really help hold the line down. Gatekeepers, a fantastic unit all round, especially against the dwarves today. They don't really have any aspect of their game which is not going to be useful against them. Halberdiers in melee, but of course crossbows at range. Same could be said to a lesser extent for the Cardolan Sharpshooters. They're not as effective either at range or in melee, but the same principles apply. Armor piercing, albeit with maces up close and personal. Royal Court of House Theronda, I think this is the first time we've seen them with their reskin as well. They did have the Numenorian look previously, but now they've been brought more into line with the rest of the makeover. Cardolan has been given, of course, the green colour scheme, very much their thing now as well. Tharbad Tollkeepers, numerous units of spears to help hold down the flank, because Cardolan have gone pretty heavily in for some cav. Again, some standard lancers with the Tharbad Riders, and you've got the mercenary crossbows as well, so more mounted crossbows over here. And then you also have the Dunedain Captains, a unit of heavy melee cavalry. Maybe not so much in terms of armour though. Now, moving on to the red team, the Elder races, we have the Dwarves of the Blue Mountains, played by T.S. Niehoff. We have the Defenders of the Blue Mountains with the Juggernauts in melee, so 2 units of them. That is a solid front line, Wardens of Thorin's Halls as well. Plenty of spears, extra damage from those axes. Not a particularly long front line or numerous, but the quality there is the sort of thing which, I mean, the dwarves are going to be just fine up front. It's whether or not they can blanket the battlefield as much as their opposition, and whether they can support that front line with units like this, the Guardians of the Blue Mountains, good unit of javelins, and of course very effective, or well, I say very, but decently effective in melee as well. The Frost Spears are very effective in a siege potentially, but again on a map like this, more open, can they get the angle considering the terrain? I mean, it does undulate a bit on the dry lake bed, but whether that's going to be enough or not remains to be seen. Just in behind we of course have the Stone Giant of Ered Luin. Suffered a rather inglorious fate last time. We'll see if he can do a little bit better. Armour piercing is the main danger to the Stone Giant, and of course while he can take a good amount of damage, stuff like javelins and crossbow bolts, because of his sheer size, all of them are really going to hit him on a volley, so it does do a lot of damage there, but not a huge amount of javelin action. Plenty of crossbows though, so he's going to need to be careful there, and of course armour piercing in melee. And then the war boars, so they do have a cavalry force as well of their own. Durin's Warborn as well, so yes, the higher end cavalry. Interesting that the Blue Mountains have gone so heavily in for that, but it looks as though the elves have not. So the Ballista from Hidden, we also have the Galathram Nobles, unsurprisingly, Lorien Bladesmen in behind, more Bladesmen, Galathram Axemen. I mean, throwing axes are of course going to be a bit of a danger for the opposition, but numbers may be an issue here as well. There are some Lorien riders over there, the Galathram riders, mighty indeed. Interestingly enough, they have resisted the urge by the looks of things to go for both bodyguard units, but that may be because of budget constraints, and they decided to go with the Silverthorn arrows instead. Not a huge amount of archers though on display for the elves, so it may end up being that they do need to be a little bit more aggressive here, the red team, which considering their lower numbers and all the cav buzzing around, I don't know if that's going to be for the best or not, but I suppose let's get this show right on the road and see how this proceeds. I can foresee there being a fair amount of speeding up. Oh, I've completely missed this. How did I miss this? The unique artillery for the Blue Mountains, the Frostling Thrower. Of course, it uses the, well, a very similar model at the very least to the Ribolt from Medieval 2, but this is, in terms of projectiles, very similar to the repeaters of the Frost Spears. A little bit less accurate, but you are going to be able to get more of these projectiles down range, and you can scarcely miss. It's got a similar sort of mechanical use anyway to the Hwacha, where if you see the enemy army, you're not going to be able to really focus down individual targets or units, but damage spread out across the whole army is very much going to be a thing. And the Ballista as well. The first blows are going to be struck in this fight, however, from the cavalry. Interesting to note though, I mean, the mercenary crossbows surely are going to be able to kite the war boars, although for now Cardolan very that name as well, China #1. Easily going to be able to kite those guys. I mean, again, the lack of archers is an interesting one. Going for double artillery in a 2v2 pitch battle though is something we've seen time and again really in the recent tourney. Of course this isn't a tourney battle, but Galathram riders do have the ranged advantage. Silverthorn arrows, I mean, even with how strong the damage is on the highest tier of elven units against the very heavy runic cataphracts from the front anyway, with the shields in effect, the damage is going to be heavily mitigated, but backs turned, that may prove to be somewhat different. The Ballista as well. Ooh, this is interesting. I mean, wide open for a charge here, but willing to tank the charge. I mean, you have to say that actually worked out better for the dwarves than it did for the Dunedain cavalry. They did take damage from that charge, but the Dunedain captains took a point-blank volley. Frostling Thrower manned by the Wardens of Thorin's Halls, but a good charge there to the Frostling Thrower crew. Time will tell whether, I mean, they do need to maintain their artillery in this battle, the red team. They are very much the ones being forced onto the defence here because of the sheer amount of cavalry that the blue team have, and of course the numbers advantage, which is why I'm so surprised they don't have more means of zoning all of this out. I mean, again, you can see the Karen Amroth Rangers have been found. So far, this battle has started off well for the blues, I think, overall. They've taken some hits, but more of the Lorien units revealing themselves. Their potential as an ambushing faction very much being played into here. axes being wielded. So I mean, Kuro does need to be careful because of the ability of the elves to deal damage, but the melee engagement is also getting underway with the Carmel's Immortals moving into melee. They'll do decently actually against the regular elven units because of the sheer numbers and the support coming in from those arrows as well. Very lightly armoured, of course, these entry-level elven units, but with a bit of support from the dwarves, I mean, those juggernauts are going to be a problem. The armour piercing will help, but the Juggernaut's one of the best units at keeping themselves alive in a melee engagement the game has to offer because of that blend of dual wielding and armour. Also decent at dealing damage as well. Scion Rim moving in. Interesting that Cardolan are lagging behind a little bit, but I think that is more by design. Lots of the engagement now, lots of the heat is being taken from Rhun, and there's not a huge amount now defensively to stop the Cardolan infantry rolling forward. I mean, the Stone Giant is here, and to be frank, in melee, Cardolan don't have an awful lot that is going to be that good against the Stone Giant. It's actually going to be mostly their crossbows that are going to be able to deal damage to him in melee, but I don't really think that's what they'll want to be doing. They'll need to try and get some sort of engagement going quickly, but the elves doing decently. I mean, this is going to be a thorough examination of how resilient Rhun are, because they do need Cardolan to come forward and give them a helping hand, because at the moment they're having to take on both the elves and the dwarves, and that level of quality coming towards them. I mean, stuff like the Galadhrim Axemen in melee don't have a huge amount that they're going to be very good at dealing with there. The Tharbad Riders getting some sort of rear charge, but the Cardolan Cavalry starting to lose its venom, really. Guardians of the Blue Mountains offering a bit of support. They do actually need to be a bit careful of friendly fire. The big guy will get in the way of some of these. Oh dear. Bloodied up by the gatekeepers. Come on, my guy. Don't do it again. Get into melee and do some damage before those crossbows kill you off. That's what Cardolan are very eager on doing, and rightly so, because if he gets into melee against Rhun here, you worry for the continued fate of the runic line. Many of them defeat seems certain. In a few areas they're doing okay. The assistance from the cavalry here on the flank. I'm still wondering how this battle is 44,000 frames long, because this is pretty much a by-the-books kind of pitch battle for the time being. Got a real back and, well, a very aggressive push forward from Rhun, and sure, I mean, their infantry isn't going to deal. I mean, here comes the Stone Giant now, wading his way through enemy lines as he slams downwards. I mean, the area of effect attacks, that's the sort of thing which we have seen from Elephant class units in the past, and I mean, Rhun are not going to respond too well to this. Flagrim, interestingly, are one of the units which can maybe leave a bit more of a scratch on the big lad, but he's already done more, I think, or at least we've seen him do more than he did last time around. Golden Raiders, I mean, trying to use the crossbows, throwing axes along the flank as well. I mean, Rhune's front line, it has lasted long enough for Cardolan to arrive. The question now is whether or not they both have sufficient numbers still to be able to bring down the quality. Over here, Cardolan coming in from the flank. Sindar Blademasters guarding in this area, another hidden unit of elves. Again, numbers is going to be the problem, and also Cardolan anchoring themselves in place with the pikes to try and give themselves a bit of a reprieve from those elven blades. It's a large amount of numbers, isn't it? Durin's Warborn. The cavalry has been going toe-to-toe. Again, the numbers from the human cavalry will give them the edge in this sort of situation, although the Royal Court are losing to the Durin's Warborn. That dwarven solidity up close, and the Royal Court are much better when they're on the move and on the charge, using that mass of theirs to devastating effect. Flaming shots. I mean, interestingly enough, the rear line of the red team has not been completely compromised, despite the fact the cavalry is still trying to find openings. The back end here is a gap, but the cavalry now is maybe less of a factor in the battlefield for both sides, and it's going to come down a little bit more to supporting units. Galadhrim Nobles, I mean, the damage that all of the ranged units, archers in particular, are doing over the long haul in this battle is going to be a little bit difficult to measure, but now we're seeing the cavalry has managed to compromise the rear lines. In Asrim, a few hefty charges from them can really help colour perceptions in this battle. Decent hits there.
Only half the enemy force remains between us and victory.
As you say, flag rim. Still though, this front line, the dwarves and the elves together, a very good blend of strengths, of course. The only thing they miss, really, both of them, is the numbers. Well, there goes the Lothlorien general. I mean, the stone giant is still very much alive and still causing an awful lot of problems in the back line. I mean, stopping the crossbows from firing, definitely more of a danger. I mean, the Narim trying to ignore the big lad that's right next to them and continue to fire. It's impressive discipline. Durin's Warborn now free from their engagement against the Royal Court of House Thorondor, so also the back lines of the blue team are actually compromised. It's become very chaotic, this fight, but still some very clearly defined front lines. How about Toll Keepers? I mean, again, they're very much a defensive unit. A cog in the machine, if you will. He seems certain. Anyway, footmen actually taking the lead ahead of the men-at-arms that they're alongside, but that's fine because the Sindar Blade Masters surely do not have the numbers to withstand much longer. Frost Spears of Azagal, we saw them firing earlier on, but now they've been pressed into service in melee. Again, all dwarven units are going to have that resilience in melee. Cardolan's general falls. Ballista crew with those spears coming in handy. Don't know if the ballista still has ammunition, I'd assume so, but being able to actually man the artillery and utilise it is going to be difficult at this stage. But the Cardolan general is a significant loss. We all know what can happen with them. But they continue to push forward with their numbers. How about Toll Keepers going after all of these archers, but Keren Amroth Rangers, and especially, of course, the Galathrim Nobles, are no slouches. But Cardolan do have their wardens on hand to try and do the business. Fleeing. There goes another general, the dwarven one. The runic one is now the only general left standing. Another unit of Sindar Blade Masters, these guys with their armour. Covel's chosen, surrounded. So again, very much a bits and pieces kind of affair here. Unsurprisingly, perhaps it's over against the initial runic advance where the elder races are having more luck, and then the reinforcing mass of Cardolan is where the forces of men are having more luck. There's a lot of gatekeepers, sharpshooters. The ballista has now been remounted and managing to rip through some of those gatekeepers, one of the more dangerous units left on the field. And seeing that it is still a threat, the Golden Raiders are not going to have the same sort of impact as the other cavalry, but they need to try and silence the artillery. Again, seeing impact from artillery on a pitch battle. Still the Stone Giant, he's been far more of a presence in this battle. More difficult to contain this sort of unit on an open field, I suppose, and he's hunting down the Cardolan sharpshooters now. The final general falls. Narim, I mean, he's done damage. I mean, the Stone Giant doesn't do damage at an express pace, but I think we're seeing his resilience now. In the last battle, I do believe it was the javelins in a choke point that managed to finish him off quickly. Here, though, he has managed to tank a few crossbow bolt volleys. I do wonder how much he's got left in the tank, but he's lumbering after the Cardolan sharpshooters. It's not looking good for them. We'll try and get away from him with all haste. Sharpshooters reloading. The gatekeepers still in play as well, 75 of them. Galathrim Nobles as well, getting overwhelmed really. Tyr Gorthard still there. I mean, Galathrim Nobles managing to get away, but only 40 of them remain. Certainly in terms of numbers, the battle is tilting one way, but in terms of overall battlefield effectiveness, I'm not sure. The amount of manoeuvring, of course, that you can do in the late stages when all of your units are engaged is a little bit more limited, but it could make all the difference here. Much, well, very clear hits from the Cardolan sharpshooters, the Galathrim Nobles. Can't afford that. Crossbow bolts with their stopping power can get right on through the hit points and armour that even the best units can sport. Frostbears of Azaghal actually winning off on this flank. I think more units were siphoned off to battle elsewhere. I think the forces of men are going to be sweating a little bit now, because they need to be able to deal with the Stone Giant, and that sort of takes away the centre point really of what they're all about. The Tharbad Tollkeepers unsurprisingly running in the face of this. They'd still have the support of those crossbow bolts, but I think when Cardolan's reinforcements started to make headway in that melee engagement, they would have been feeling pretty good about things, the forces of men, but now maybe a little bit less so. They still have the numbers. Can they do the business? Tharbad Tollkeepers running after the Galathrun nobles. There doesn't seem to be much in the way of cavalry now. There's some very depleted mercenary crossbows still alive, but they don't have the ability to hunt down those Galathrun nobles in the backfield now. Then again, there's no cavalry from the red team either to be able to bail them out. They're going to continue to flee from those Tharbad Tollkeepers. They would win that melee fight, I think. Oh yeah, 30 to 19, even outnumbered as they are. Here is the Stone Giant, brave of the few remaining wardens of Tir Gorthad, to take him on. Yeah, and I believe he counts as an infantry unit, so the pikes are not going to have their extreme damage boost that they do against cavalry class units. And of course, with his mass and area of effect attacks, he's perhaps the perfect pike breaker that the game has now. It's a little bit different when it comes to the gatekeepers, because the armour-piercing edge that halberds have will have a level of effectiveness against him. I mean, to be fair, these Sindar Blade Masters have been fighting a losing battle for a long time, and they're still going, even with the support of the big boy now, though. It may end up coming down to whether or not the blue team have the numbers to be able to deal with the remaining quality of the Stone Giant and the Galathrun nobles. There's a few stragglers elsewhere as well, Galathrun nobles using their Silverthorns to try and finish off more of these Cardolan shadow bows. Still 99 Tharbad Tollkeepers. Need to keep moving. Need to keep hounding the opposition. Sindar Blade Masters getting into more of the supporting tools that the humans have, and the more I look at this, the more I think the elder races may actually have this. Tharbad Tollkeepers shaken. I mean, a big part of it is going to be the Stone Giant. If this guy falls, then all of these Cardolan units will be freed up to overwhelm the few remaining elves that are putting pressure on the runic units over there. Also, if the Stone Giant peels himself off this engagement, I mean, that does mean Cardolan can move across to try and overwhelm the elves as well. I think he's trying to avoid the gatekeepers for the time being, go after the Greenway footman instead. I mean, this is surely going to result in them routing fairly quickly. The general's gone and they're exhausted, and they're facing effectively a giant boulder with pointy sticks. Galathrun warriors still alive, managing to get their charge off. I don't know if they'll last too much longer in melee against a more healthy unit of these sharpshooters. Yeah, they rout as a result of that. Being an elf will only carry you so far. Sindar Blade Master's victory seems certain for them. It was an interesting, an overhead, crushing blow, but it got parried by the crossbowman. Galathrun nobles still running around the backfield. Yeah, surely it's the elves are going to get overrun here. Whatever happened to... I guess that's it. Galathrun nobles and the Stone Giant. This is going to be really an examination of how resilient the Stone Giant truly is. Just because if everything really depends on him being able to absorb a lot of damage and deal a lot of damage. Morale damage might be more key, actually. The Galathrun nobles can help, of course. Still 30 of them. So there is still hope for the elder races, but to be fair to the blue team here, they have managed to pick off a few of those elven stragglers, which was making things a little bit more awkward, but now it's a far easier affair. And this, I feel, is probably where the length of the battle is going to come from. I think we're going to have to speed things up a little bit here, because I can see exactly where this is going. It may even have to be a ×6 speed, this, because it's going to be a case of the Galathrim nobles having to try and kite things on foot. And the Stone Giant turning around, I mean, he's going to do tons of damage to those Tharbad Tollkeepers. Quite happy to continue to do the business there. They don't really have the melee capabilities anymore. Sharpshooters, of course, do have that armor-piercing damage, but what happens to the Gatekeepers? They die? Oh, the Shadow Bows. I think they... Did they? I guess they must have. Did the Elves focus them down with a few volleys? I would have thought there were too many of them to do that, but evidently not. And there are a few left. 12. Don't know if that's going to be enough. I mean, it really does depend on, like, obviously cumulative damage on these kind of units is the important thing, and you can't really see how much health they have left. Galathrim nobles moving in to try and give a helping hand. Victory still seems certain for them, which is pretty crazy. Still doing that. Pancaking the opposition down. Fighting side by side with the very best that Lothlorien have to offer. And with the support of the Stone Giant, they're doing pretty well. I still can't believe this battle is 44,000 frames long, even if... Like, what sort of kiting is going on here? Tharbad Tollkeepers are fleeing. That must be some sort of error. What a weird situation. What a strange state of affairs. Yeah, I don't think they're going to have the ability. I mean, the problem is here, they have to try and mob the Stone Giant, but in so doing, of course, that's when it can do its heftiest damage, and just having that little bit of support from those Galathrim means that not all of your units are going to be pulling in the same direction. Some of them have to try and fight the Elves, and that's an unenviable task as well. There's one Merc crossbow. Is that going to be the cause of the 44,000 frames? The one mercenary crossbowman trying to shoot the Stone Giant down? Perhaps. I mean, that's one thing you would say, is the Stone Giant, based on his speed, is very easily kited in a battle like this, but they don't have the ability to kite anymore. Yeah, I think that is going to be the cause of it, isn't it? It's the only thing I can see that makes any sort of sense, because Cardolan are fleeing en masse now. The strong crossbows are surely not far behind. It's not looking good for them. My footman returning.
1,000 curses. Our men are running like cowards. Rally them before victory runs away with them.
There goes Rhun.
Watch how these weaklings run. Hunt them down.
And that's also the last of the Elves killed off from a Cardolan perspective. So now I think this is going to be where we... There's no way that I can talk for 30k frames over one mercenary crossbowman trying to shoot a rock, but we'll move up to ×6 speed, I think. The returning Greenway footman. Oh no, he's actually not going to kite him. Is he going to get squashed? No. I wonder what a charge attack from the Stone Giant would look like. I wonder how much ammunition the mercenary crossbowman... I mean, clearly quite a lot. Greenway footman returning. Oh, that was a different attack. He just stood on that guy. Not doing his pancaking attack. Yeah, obviously this is not the most... I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if the Stone Giant can withstand all of the ammunition that Cardolan have left here, but it's obviously not a particularly thrilling spectacle. The Benny Hill theme comes to mind when this sort of thing starts to happen, although at least on this occasion it's not completely without merit. I mean, Cardolan could end up winning the battle as a result of this, but the Stone Giant actually does have the ability to keep up and catch the Cardolan footman, so fair enough from that point of view. The one scene from Game of Thrones where the guy tries to shoot the giant with the crossbow and he just gets splattered against the wall. Like, this does spring to mind in this situation, but how many crossbow bolts would it take to split rock? You have to hit it in the same place an awful lot. I don't know if he's got the bolts to do that. He might have to scavenge some off his dead brethren. What a bizarre situation to be in. I mean, the good thing here is that we can zoom very far away and we can still see what's going on because of how big the stone giant is. Peculiar state of affairs. I'm rooting for the stone giant after his very disappointing debut. This has been a far better performance, and it does really showcase what he offers Ered Luin as well, in the case that you have an extremely difficult single entity to try and kill off. And as long as you look after him against the main threats, stuff like javelins, then he can really do an awful lot of heavy lifting for you, especially in conjunction with how resilient the main dwarven infantry actually is. It may have been an idea to bring more of the heavy dwarven spears rather than that cavalry, and then they could have really bulked up front. Very peculiar state of affairs, isn't it? Imagine if this was the grand final of the tournament. Really very much a David versus Goliath situation, but I think everyone's rooting for Goliath. Going after... Whatever happened to those pikes? Are they fleeing? Or are they hidden? I guess they must be hidden. Weird. Very weird. We're still not even halfway through the fight, technically speaking. I'm kind of tempted to make a cut, honestly, and see what happens in the final 2,000 frames, because this is going to be the entirety of the battle from here, isn't it? And nothing's really going to change until right close to the end. So I'm going to do that, I think. We'll rejoin when we get past all of this. So we shall rejoin here, and nothing much has changed. It's been the same thing happening over the long haul, and I don't begrudge it, like I said, although there we go, we rejoined just at the right time as well. I was right to pick the 2,000 frame mark as he finally gets pancaked, and I think, you know, you have to say that that's the result that everyone wanted, really. Everyone wanted the Stone Giant to be able to pull that off. You don't want to see him lose this fight to kiting after doing such a good job of absorbing basically the entire ammunition supply of that unit of mercenary crossmen. It may have been bound up in one guy, spread out across a long period of time, but he manages to pull through, and damage done to him throughout the entire battle as well. A far stronger showing here, and really showcasing what sort of unit Ered Luin have on their hands. The Stone Giant was also paying attention to where the final Cardolan unit was hiding, because he's going to lumber over and deal with them also. Interesting. Ah, there they are. Greenway footmen. 80 of them. I mean, there's no real sense in them trying to kite away at this point. And it's not looking good for them. If the crossbows couldn't do the business, then the pikes certainly won't be able to. As they begin to fight, pikes down. Can they pull off the comeback victory? I don't think so, somehow. Whole clutches of them fall, their general is gone. Cardolan, not exactly well known for their morale at the best of times. Please don't tell me they're going to try and run. No, I think it's just the strange nature of a single entity model. Medieval 2 is not used to this sort of combat, especially not against someone so big. Then, oh, there he goes, the other seldom seen attack. Very difficult to make work in Medieval 2 single entities. It's one of the best examples of it that I've seen, I think, the Stone Giant. And there we have it. Victory. And the Stone Giant pulls it off. A very weird kind of battle, that one. The vast majority of the frames weren't actually seen because they were cut out. But a very brutal fight early on, actually. Very aggressive and interesting interplay. Obviously, the Stone Giant may have been the star of the show, but Rhun coming forward and then Cardolan just delaying their advance and coming around the side, actually, I think was a really good idea. And against most forces, I think it would have paid off, actually, considering, you know, the lower numbers of Lothlorien and Ered Luin, but the artillery, some of the supporting units, and of course, you know, the high tier elves and the Stone Giant meant that they weren't able to quite make it stick. Maybe, you know, and again, the complete lack of javelins. That's the sort of thing which is the main weakness of the Stone Giants, but crossbows can do the business as well, and as we saw, the Stone Giant is capable of withstanding an awful lot of punishment. Artillery maybe as well could have been an answer, but maybe cavalry charges. But in the end, they weren't able to make any of those blows really stick. And it was Ered Luin who won. I mean, cursory glance at the runic casualties inflicted. The cavalry was the main thing, you'd have to say. Shadowbows also over the long haul of the battle, doing a decent job also. The crossbows not so much. But the cavalry in the backfield did do a very decent job. They did manage to expose the opposition eventually. The artillery didn't really do a huge amount for the red team in the end, and you could say that maybe the double artillery didn't really pay off here. It got some blows, but not enough to really justify its cost here. And maybe the aggression of Rhun and Cardolan meant that that was the case, but they had to win it through other means in the end. So yeah, a bit of redemption there for the big stony boy, and yeah, hopefully we'll see more of that sort of thing in the future. Of course, this wasn't the tournament grand final, as much as I kind of wish it was. I think that would have been really quite fun. But we'll see. I mean, we still have the other semi-final to show, and the grand final, of course, of that upcoming. Again, like I said, I kind of need to be careful about what version I'm on here, because they have rattled through a few changes here and there. This is the same version, though, as we saw previously, the Stone Giant, so there was no balance changes in between the two here. I don't think there has been since either. I think the Stone Giant has remained static. Other things have changed a little bit here and there. But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully we'll see a bit more of the tournament. Hopefully we'll see a couple more set-piece battles as well. And hopefully a few other things in the near future. But we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Oh yeah, big thank you to Kuro as well for sending this win in. Obviously, mostly motivated, I think, by the fact the Stone Giant had a poor opening showing, at least in terms of battles I've shown. But this was certainly not the case here. Obviously, the hero of the hour. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me